And today on Second Opinion with Dr. Ebony Jade Hilton, we're breaking down domestic violence. What goes through the mind of a woman who's trying to survive it? And how does she find healing and hope on the other side? Plus, a possible turning point in pancreatic cancer. Are new treatments finally giving patients more time and more hope? We'll explore the new developments. Also, a closer look at ALS, also known as Lou Gehrig's disease. What early symptoms you should never ignore. And we're looking into your bathroom habits. Could scrolling on your phone actually increase your risk of hemorrhoids? What you need to know to protect your health starts right now on Second Opinion. First up, domestic violence. Now, just how big of an issue is it? Well, about 20 people per minute are physically abused by an intimate partner in the United States of America. And just this past week, we learned of the horrific murder-suicide involving Virginia's former Lieutenant Governor, Justin Fairfax, who killed his wife, Serena Fairfax, and then turned the gun on himself. As tragic as that is, it was one of many headlines of the same devastating ending, including a murder-suicide in Tennessee, in which a man shot and killed himself after killing the woman in the home, and the horrific tragedy in Shreveport, Louisiana, where 8 children are now dead after the father of 7 of those victims took their lives. Joining me today to talk about how women navigate if they are a part of this violent situation are licensed mental therapist Robin May and also domestic violence survivor and advocate Nichelle Wilson. Thank you both for joining me for this important conversation, ladies.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah. So, Robin, let's start with you. We've had you on many shows at this point, but nothing as heavy as this topic, right? So, first, to be clear, not all domestic violence has to be a violent situation physically, right? Can you explain what are other situations that women are suffering through with these types of relationships?
Dr. Ebony, thank you for having me on. First of all, can I just collectively say for all of us, it's okay for us not to be okay.
Yeah.
Can I just say that first? It is okay for us not to be okay. Watching the news, being on social media over the last couple of weeks, as you just outlined, my heart just keeps breaking. So much so, I posted on my personal social media, is something going on with my algorithm? Like, what's happening? And it is heartbreaking for so many of us, even if we've never experienced domestic violence in and of itself. But to answer your question, there are actually, in my practice, more often than not, I am dealing with women who are navigating the terrains of what we can call coercive control, emotional abuse, spiritual abuse, financial abuse. And those dynamics often go overlooked because you don't see a physical manifestation of the violence. And so even if someone is being physically harmed, we want them to find safety. But I don't want women to minimize any level of controlling behavior, harmful behavior, even if it hasn't yet risen to physical violence.
And when you're talking to the women collectively, or I guess in your practice, what are they saying that typically goes through their mind that makes them stay in that situation? You know, oftentimes you hear people say, well, why don't they just leave? Clearly, that is not necessarily easy to do. So what's going on at that time?
Dr. Ebony, when women say, or when I hear other people say, what's interesting is not just men who say it, I hear people say it, period. Why won't they leave? Why didn't they leave? I want us to start asking, why did they feel unsafe to? Why did they feel unsafe to leave? Why did they feel like they couldn't leave? Now, the question you asked me is really, really loaded, and there are many factors. You know, I could go, I'm so passionate about this, I could go on, but there are many factors to why women stay in situations. One, many times, there's so many things, but one of the things I find in my practice is a deep, deep hope and belief that they're going to change. It's a mindset that many women carry of endurance, long suffering. I was talking to a woman just 2 days ago, and I'm walking through with her and I'm talking through the things and I'm asking her about what her decision is about whether she's staying in a relationship or not. And she said to me, I'm just trying to honor God. I know God wants me to practice long suffering. And I had to gently, as a pastor's wife, share with her, this is not what the Bible talks about with long suffering. This is abuse. It was like a light bulb went off for her. So I think there are spiritual aspects of it, deeply rooted faith ideologies that may not be rooted quite in truth. It is cultural. You know, one of the biggest things is children. It's financial. If I leave, I don't know that I can financially support myself and my children by myself. And so I'm not leaving my children. And so we can't just say it's one thing. It's a lot of different factors. And Dr. Ebony, what's so interesting is different factors for different women. I want to say this just so that I can hold all of us accountable. That is the reason we want to be careful about the messaging that we even give on social media. When we say things like, she's dumb, she's stupid, why is she doing this? You never know what you don't know. And you never know the factors that are contributing. Again, many times the woman does not feel safe enough to leave for many different factors.
And when you're talking to those women, especially when they say, hey, my kids, what resources are they available that you kind of point them to say, if this is for financial reasons that you think that you can't do this on your own, completely understand that. If it's because of safety that you feel like there's a fear of if I leave, he may do something to them. What do you tell a woman in that moment?
Well, I wish I could tell you that there was a plethora of resources. I don't have a lot of them myself that I can point women to, because what I want you to understand, what I want the people listening to, it's not just the money in their checking account. It is often the legal fight, and the court system is not easy to navigate, to say the least. And so a lot of times it's not just whether I can feed my child tomorrow. If I'm deciding to leave this marriage, if he is the person who has more of the financial leverage, or even if I can meet him dollar for dollar. If there has been a coercive control of physical violence and emotional violence, many times that partner is willing to take it to the hill. They're willing to take it to the max. And so there is no stopping. At some point, you have to cry uncle. And so it's not just the dollar amount. So there are several things that I try to encourage women to do, and none of them are easy. And one of the dynamics I often find myself in, because I'm such a rights fighter in my real life, I'm a justice fighter, and I want you to get what's owed to you, and I want things to be fair. But many times you have to decide, I prefer my peace than the dollar amount. So sometimes it's making a decision to release whatever you think you could get out of a divorce or that's rightfully yours, and just choose peace.
In your experience in choosing that piece, I think sometimes it's to cut it off before you get to the points of definitely of the violence. So what is in your experience that ladies are saying that, hey, these are little red flags early in the relationship that I kind of said, okay, not to ignore it, because it wasn't that I ignored it, I noticed it, but I didn't think it would get to where it got to. What are those kind of flares that go off that women should recognize to say, hey, this is going to go down a very dangerous path?
Well, okay, so to start out with that, what I first want to say is that is a very fair question. And that is a question that I hope, Dr. Ebony, I think I shared with you, I have 3 daughters, and these are the conversations I'm having with them, and I'm hoping to continue to have with them well before they're looking toward marriage. When my older 2 are dating, I'm trying to have these conversations, but I want to make sure we're clear about the distinction, because particularly some of the stories we've heard recently, a lot of those women did everything you were supposed to do. And so we want to make sure that we separate that conversation from them. But to the women, what I am telling the women I'm working with, because this conversation is coming up at just about every session, I am saying, let's all commit to allowing our lives to be a legacy for theirs. In other words, let's have these conversations to help prevent whatever we can. So with that, what I tell women in particular, whatever you learned on your fantasy shows, whatever you learned in I Need You to Complete Me, whatever you learned in the, one of my clients said, I grew up watching the stories. I was People don't know what the stories are. We're old. But I grew up watching the stories, and I want that kind of love. All of that, let's put that on the side. Because when you start thinking about things like, I want all of your time, I want to isolate you from your family and friends. I am dictating what you do with your money. One of the things I often find with a lot of men in these relationships, there's a financial control. Stop working. I want you to stop working. Let me take care of you. That sounds great. I want the soft life. But if you have noticed that there is an element of control to that, you have to pay attention to that. When you're afraid, when there's a physical, when your intimacy becomes physical without your consent, that is a red flag. Anything that starts isolating you, separating you, causing you to feel like you have to shrink, you know you have to tiptoe. You're careful to say this, because if I say this, that might get him upset. Raised voices, easily agitated. We could go on and on. You want to pay attention to all of those signs, because a pattern becomes a pattern after one time. Let me say it again. A pattern becomes a pattern after one time. So when you've given 2, 3, 4 passes, it's now a pattern. The subtle things, pay attention to the subtle behaviors as a red flag.
In the words of Dr. Maya Angelou, when they show you the first time, believe them. You know, and it's one of these things too, I think with a lot of women, there's a stigma, right? There's a shame that comes with having this dark secret that my home is not perfect, right? And I would assume there's a fear of embarrassment of what if I come out and now, you know, I'm successful in all other areas of my life, but my marriage, my relationship is in shambles, and how do I go and seek for help, right? If there are family members, however, that are picking up on signs that, hey, something looks a little bit off, is it dangerous for a family member to intervene? How should a family member, if they are going to intervene, what should they do? Should they confront the woman? Should they confront the man? How does it work?
So this is very tricky and sticky. We have a society where what happens in my house stays in my house. I am so glad, Dr. Ebony, you mentioned the shame factor, because when I tell you that is so high on the list, because what's interesting is that, remember, domestic violence is often, or even when it's not physical, any type of coercion, any type of control, it is often connected to isolating and shrinking you back. And many men who perpetuate these acts, listen, they are attracted to high-powered, high-capacity women, which is a misnomer. A lot of times people envision that somebody who is experiencing domestic violence is more meek and more mild. No, it's often very successful, high-powered women. And yes, they're killing it in the boardroom. They're running the organization. They're at the top of their sorority. So it does have a lot of shame in it when you start to find out what's happening in the home. And so then your question was, how do family members intervene? The main thing a family member can do, the main thing a licensed therapist can do, is keeping the door open. Keep taking away the shame. Keep saying you're always safe here. Not telling someone what they have to do, because when you start telling them you need to do this, you need to do that, when they don't do it, they feel the shame. So then they're not going to come back to you because they're so embarrassed. So all you're saying is this door is always open. I'm always here for you. Now, this is in the case of things that you're not clear about. When you know that there is violence, keep doing whatever you got to do. Call the police, do whatever you have to do. But I'm talking about those subtle things that you're a little bit concerned, you're not quite sure. My ask for you, and I'm asking this with such passion because I've held too many women in my arms, held too many women's hands who feel like they have nowhere to go. Keep saying, this door over here is always open. You can always come over here. You are always safe here. Keep that on repeat, because there will come a time that will come up in their mind, whether it's 2:00 in the morning, or it's 3 p.m. in the afternoon. They will remember that you said your door was always open.
First Lady May, that's what I'm going to call you from here on out. Thank you so much for just sharing that. And I'm sure there's someone that's listening right now that says, hey, I don't know where an open door may be, but maybe can I get in touch with you? That maybe you'll have some words of advice that they're struggling through a moment right now. Where can they find you?
My website is robinmayonline.com. And Dr. Ebony, there's a fire that has been lit in me. I am serious about empowering women to find that safety, to find freedom, to return to themselves, to stop. I have to talk to the Christian women in particular. A lot of Christian women, we self-deny. I'm denying myself, but there's a difference between self-denial and self-betrayal. And I am committed to helping women tap into the freedom and their agency and their autonomy. So go to robinmayonline.com.
robinmayonline.com. Thank you so much. And we will definitely have you back very soon.
Thank you for having me.
So, Nichelle, you're an advocate for women like yourself who've experienced domestic violence. Do you mind sharing any part of your story with the viewers to say, what is it like to be in these types of relationships?
Absolutely. Thank you, Doctor, for asking that question. I would say it's like an out-of-body experience. It's something that you won't see coming. And honestly, the way that I was raised, I didn't see it coming. And to share pieces of what transpired, I was married. And at the time, my husband, during a domestic dispute, decided that he was going to throw my daughter and I into a wall, which ended in me having a concussion and she having a fractured skull at only 2 months, and then left and went to his police friends. So as we're fighting really my daughter was fighting for her life, and in the children's hospital, I was approached by a cop asking for my report of attacking my then husband. So I was really confused, and people asked, oh my God, why didn't he go to jail? Or that was his claim to fame. Well, if I did these things, then I would be in jail. And to be transparent and honest with women, men, whomever, I didn't do the right thing because I was scared. He had me so scared that I was like, no, he didn't do this. He didn't do this. It was a mistake. It was an accident. Whatever it was he was telling me that I needed to say, that's what I was saying, because I was in fear of my life and, more importantly, my child's life, and not knowing what was going to transpire the weekend that she spent fighting for her life in the hospital, which actually was her very first Easter.
Oh, my God. 2 months old. And hearing that, it gives me chills. Was that the first time he ever did something like that to you? Or were there warning signs along the way of, hey, this man has the potential to not only harm me, but also harm his own child?
Not initially, but I would say as the relationship continued and as I learned more things about my husband that I did not know, I was like, oh, wow, there were signs there. But it was, to me, after the fact. So I didn't know how to react, or, again, I was still a newlywed. And so you get these advice from people that, oh, the first year of marriage is so hard and you go through this, you go through that. My parents been together since they were 16. So I was just really confused and not knowing what to do. And I was being manipulated by my ex. I really gave him the tools to manipulate me because I was very honest and transparent as a person. And so it was really kind of easy, in my opinion, looking back, to know what to do, how to play on certain parts of my world that mattered the most.
And when you say you were manipulated, can you explain? Because there may be a woman who right now doesn't even recognize that she is being manipulated, right? What are some of those signs?
So when you ask, were there, like, has he done this before? Has it gotten that kind of physical before, where blood and things were happening? Absolutely not. But it definitely were other signs, where breaking a computer, breaking a laptop, grabbing me so hard that a bracelet would break, or locking me out of a house. I mean, so yes, it financially, taking money without saying anything, not paying certain things as discussed. So yes, it was happening. It just, by the time it got to be that type of physical and our child was involved, I could no longer ignore whatever the signs could have been or not been, or whatever the case may be, or assuming in my mind this was a mistake and he can change. Because I think a lot of people get hurt thinking that their partner can change. And that's not always true. And that was something that I had a hard time dealing with family and friends. And, because he was a person that no one would think who he was behind closed doors. Mm-hmm. It's like, what are you talking about? This guy is this guy is that. And I'm like, you guys have no idea,
Yeah. And what was the most, you feel like, damaging advice that people were given to you? Like, did that cause you to stay for longer in a relationship because people were saying, hey, he's a good guy. Like, you don't leave a good one, right? What can be some of those kind of quotes that family need to be very careful before they start to say that to someone that may be in a situation like yours?
Normalizing what goes on in their personal relationships and plugging you and someone else in it. If someone's coming to you with genuine feelings and emotions, take heed to that and try not to put yourself in that situation or what you may have worked through in relationships, because everyone is different. Mm-hmm. Everyone is different. And I think to me, it was the biggest thing was, just pray. And so that became, he found us a therapist that prays. So now we're going in this therapist's office and pretending, that things are going to change because I believe in God. Again, playing on certain things that, if I get a therapist that is faith-based, she'll stay a little longer. Right. And I did, and I realized as soon as we hit the parking lot, it was like a switch. Mm-hmm. Like, oh my gosh, so those are the things. And it's hard for me because I do believe in God. And I do believe that sometimes people can go through things and pray through it. And, therapy can help. But then there's another piece where you have to know what your boundaries are. You have to know what's good for you, what's good for your children. And children didn't ask to be here. So we as adults have to make better decisions, especially when we have children that cannot take care of themselves.
Right. And when it came down to, I'm assuming when he threw you and your child against the wall, there had to be some type of fear of, okay, if he'll do this, what else may he possibly do? And that fear can sometimes make you paralyzed and not want to move because you're scared of what may happen next. Was that the same situation for you? And if so, how did you overcome that fear to actually get out of that situation?
Yes, I think because he successfully got away in that moment of not going to jail because of my fear, it allowed him to do several other things that wasn't the first attempt of him trying to take my life. And it continued. And to the point where I even had to fight against Child Protective Services to try to protect my child and getting family involved to protect us because it got really, really bad. And so, yes, my fear was this will happen, calling the cops. And then again, when someone is friends with the cops that's in your area, nothing's happening.
Right.
So what do you do? So I had to create a plan with Child Protective Services. They scheduled a therapist that was assigned to our case. And by the grace of God, she was actually able to see him in action and refused to meet with him again because she feared for her own life. And again, this is all behind closed doors. And so in that moment, I really think because she saw what she saw, she was able to be an advocate for me and my daughter. And we came up with a plan, a safety plan that my daughter and I eventually was able to escape out of that situation. So it was a plan. It wasn't something that happened overnight, but it was very hard and very difficult.
And what do you do if you have joint custody, right? Is there a system in place where now we can say, hey, we have to protect the child? There's only supervised visitation, or how does that work moving forward? Because I'm assuming, again, a lot of women are saying, if I get out and now we have joint custody and I have to turn my child over, now I can't even be there to protect them. So I have to stay. Can you
So in that, absolutely. Initially, I was going through the court system in Texas, and it was not helpful because, again, my ex-husband best friend was his attorney. His attorney was a legacy attorney. So, the family had been in the court system for forever, and they knew this person and that person and that person. So because I still owned property outside of that place, and we actually got married in the place that I owned property, I was able to come back. And I was able to successfully land an amazing attorney, family attorney, that was able to get my case transferred to where I felt safe at. And it started off with a TPO. And then after that, and to be honest with you, I do not have to share custody because my ex-husband, we have a permanent restraining order against him. That's how bad it gotten. And then he decided to give up his rights. So he does not have rights to my child, but we do have a permanent protective order against him. So if he were to ever to come back and to try to harm us, then he will actually go to jail.
Wow. I can't even imagine the levels of horror that you had to live through in order to get that protective order for not only you, but your daughter. And you're now, you've turned this pain into power. You're a contributing author in a book, The Phenomenal Forgiveness. Can you speak on that? I know you say forgiveness is the golden rule of emotional healing. How do you get to that point in life? And why do you say that?
I think forgiveness is for us. And it took me going through a small group with my church when talking about forgiveness, where I learned a little bit deeper because I had to forgive myself. I had to forgive my relationship with God. I had to forgive my ex-husband because at the end of the day, the love that I have for him is through this child that I'm able to raise with love and with care every single day. So I would never want her to think that I hate a piece of her that she had no control over. So that forgiveness for me is more of emotional forgiveness, right? So that I can wake up every day and emotionally have a good day, emotionally mature emotionally deal with whatever it is that may come about. So that's what that meant, just kind of letting go of that emotional control and just saying, hey, you made a choice to forgive. And that's what this looks like. Some days are easier and some days are harder.
Undoubtedly, baby girl probably saved your life. And, you started a nonprofit, Happy Mama, Happy Mimi. What is your mission with this nonprofit?
So we like to create. So Happy Mama, Happy Minnie. I'm a co-founder. My daughter's the other co-founder. We started this organization in 2019, and we basically pour into the community and help mamas, help a mini, one mama, one mini at a time, giving lasting impact, of healing and coming out of situations that we just didn't have any control out of, and building a village, building a support system that you may not know that you needed or something that you were searching for. We're all at different walks in our lives at different times. So that's what we do. And we take a lot of pride in it. We turn all of our negative pieces of our story into something positive, hopefully for someone else.
Well, I know it will save someone's life just to hear your story and for them to see there is life on the other side of this. So thank you, Nichelle, for sharing your personal story. And if there's someone who wants to just help, whether that's buy your book, whether that's also, donate to your nonprofit, Happy Mommy, Happy Minnie, where can they find you and where can we find those resources?
www.happymamahappymini.org. And that's HappyMamaHappyMini.
That's perfect. Thank you so much. And hug your little baby for us.
Listen, daily. She fought for a long time to be here with us. And I just thank God through all the MRIs and everything that lasted well over a year that she is in good health and in good spirits. And she knows that she's surrounded by love.
Bless her life. Thank you for sharing your story.
Thank you, Doctor. Have a nice night.
You too. And still to come, we're breaking down one of the deadliest cancers, and it attacks an organ that's always on. What exactly is the pancreas? Stay with us.
I'm Brittany Noble, Midwest-born, HBCU educated with experience in newsrooms across the country. Well, I've teamed up with Roland Martin to bring to you The Breakdown. This isn't just news. It's our stories, our voice, our community. Join me for The Breakdown, Monday through Friday at midday, only on the Black Star Network.
Now to one of the deadliest forms of cancer, pancreatic cancer. It has an overall 5-year survival rate of approximately 13% in the United States. Moreover, we see Black Americans have the highest pancreatic cancer incidence rate of any other racial group in the United States of America. In fact, multiple studies show pancreatic cancer incidence in Black Americans as high as 30 to 70% higher than any other racial group in the United States, with a 32% higher pancreatic cancer death rates than white Americans. Joining me now to talk about the pancreatic cancer is Dr. Mitchell, who is the president of the National Medical Association. Welcome, Dr. Mitchell.
It's great to be here. Good to see you, Dr. Ebony. It's great to be on again.
Yeah, thank you for being back. And can you share for our viewers, I know many people have heard of someone with pancreatic cancer, but what exactly is it?
Well, first of all, what's the pancreas? I'm a pathologist, and so I do autopsies for a living. I'm an anatomic pathologist, and I also diagnose disease, including cancer under the microscope. And what is the pancreas? Well, the pancreas has two major functions. Its digestive function helps us digest food. It produces lipase, and people may have heard of that before. It breaks down fat. It also breaks down protein, and it also breaks down starches like potatoes. And that's its exocrine function. It's a function of glands that secrete these digestive enzymes into the small bowel. And then it has this endocrine function. It has a function where it regulates our sugar in our blood. It does that by producing insulin. And also does that by producing glucagon. Insulin, when we're trying to make sure that our cells get sugar, get glucose, and then glucagon when there's not enough sugar in the system. Where it's positioned is in the belly. It's on the right side. It kind of grows across the midline of the belly, and it's the head of the pancreas is right there with the first part of the small intestine called the duodenum. It has the ability to excrete right into the small bowel right there in the beginning when the food is coming right out of the stomach. There's signals to say, hey, you have a high protein meal, so you want to excrete these proteases, and fat, you want to excrete this lipases, and so on. It's also associated with the gallbladder and the liver. So there's a lot that's happening in that small bowel to break down our food. And the pancreas is extremely important to that. And without the pancreas, we would not be able to digest our food. And so it's always on, it's always active. Those people that have diabetes type 1 have problems with the cells that produce insulin, and those people with diabetes 2 have problem with the insulin that is already being produced by the pancreas. The pancreas can get a couple of major diseases. Pancreatitis, which is inflammation. Some people get that with a lot of alcohol consumption or high protein diets that may lead to a stone that blocks not only the gallbladder, but also the pancreas. But then there's cancer. The majority of types of cancers in the pancreas is what we call adenocarcinoma of the pancreas. And that adenocarcinoma, adeno means gland, that's usually of the glands that make those secretions that I just talked about, the proteases, the lipases, the amylases. Those glands, when they're over generating, they can cause cancer. And then there are a small subset of cancers called neuroendocrine cancers that are part of the endocrine system that support insulin. So. And then cancer itself is, either the cells can't shut off from repetition, or the cells are always on, always revving. So there's one or two, and pancreatic cancer is a deadly cancer. Only 13% have a 5-year survival rate. So it's a pretty bad type of cancer.
And with it being that deadly, you say 13% survival rate. The question is it difficult to detect? Is that the reason why it's so deadly, that people are usually getting, treatment at a later stage? And if so, if it is kind of difficult to detect, what are some of those early warning signs that people should not ignore, particularly as it kind of points towards the digestive system?
Well, Doc, you said it right. It is hard to detect, and largely it comes with a vague pain in the belly, sometimes in the right side that will radiate to the back. You can also see jaundice, which is a yellowing of the skin and the eyes, similar to what you might see in liver disease. And then you have some digestive issues. You might have some loose stools or some constipation. So it's very vague types of signs and symptoms, and that's really why it's so deadly, because when it comes to detection, it usually comes with those symptoms after someone has been dealing with those symptoms for a long period of time. So if you have an individual that is going to try to weather through some of these GI symptoms or some of the things that we just talked about, then they're going to come to diagnosis a little bit later. And so what do? Early detection, early screening is important. The National Medical Association is a proponent of early detection biomarkers, and that's one of the biggest kind of new early detection biomarkers is utilizing multi-cancer early detection. We just put out a paper last year that did a survey of Black physicians, African American physicians and medical students, that showed that over 85% of them would support a multi-cancer early detection. And that is a genomic genetic test that uses liquid as well as AI algorithms to detect what we term cancer cell-free DNA that's circulating in the bloodstream. So when someone has cancer, there are small pieces of DNA that circulate throughout the bloodstream that can be detected, and then using an algorithm and sequencing, being able to determine what likelihood is it that it's a certain type of cancer. It's a screening tool, so that means that after you use that type of screening tool, you would have to go through the processes to see whether or not you indeed have cancer and what type. It's those types of cancers, those hard to detect cancers like pancreatic cancer, that can be detected in individuals using MCED.
In listening to that, you mentioned genetics. I've had 2 uncles who unfortunately passed away from pancreatic cancer within the last 6 years. How important are genetics and family history when it comes to pancreatic cancer? And should someone like me that says, hey, I lost 2 of my uncles, should I have early screening? Should I get genetic counseling? What should be the next move?
Yeah, there's several organizations out there. PCAN is one of them. And that determines when you should get your screening. But yes, if you have a first order relative, and you, quite frankly, if you have any relative that has pancreatic cancer, then you might want to get screened. I think it's important for you to get screened if you have a family history of pancreatic cancer. That is a risk factor for developing it yourself. In your case, we know that men have a higher propensity towards the disease than women. And so I have two good friends, one who got it very, very early. He was in his 20s when he got it, and he lived for a pretty long time before he died. And then I have a good friend who now is a year into his treatment, and we'll see how it goes for him. And we're praying for him on a regular basis. But yeah, screening. One of the screening modalities or screening requirements is that you have a first order relative who has who's had pancreatic cancer. They don't screen everyone. That's why we're proponents at the NMA for MCED, which is a low, a least invasive type of screening modality that will not only screen for pancreatic cancers, but other cancers like colon cancer, prostate cancer, and the like.
And that consists of a blood test for people?
That's right. That's a simple blood test. And so we, if you have that family member or you're worried about it, you should talk to your provider and talk to your insurance company about getting an early detection biomarker test that is being offered by your insurance and offered by your provider, because that's really where it is as it relates to pancreatic cancer. And I'll say one other thing is, pancreatic cancer patients do better when you get right into a clinical trial. There's a lot of clinical trials surrounding pancreatic cancer. So you want to get yourself into a clinical trial. That's where some of the innovative approaches are occurring. And then also clinical trial testing, just in general. Our community needs to be in clinical trial testing so that there's a diversity in the biomarkers, in how cancer cells are showing up in Black and brown people. Really from the diaspora, we know that it's more geography and genetic variations from geography than the constructs of race. And because we're such a homogeneous population in the Americas and throughout the globe, you may have the genes of someone who is in the African diaspora, but you might not look like it, or you might be someone who has something that is prone to disease. The genomics and the genetics of the patient is extremely, extremely important when it comes to cancer diagnosis and early detection.
Well, we thank you, Dr. Mitchell, for bringing clarity to such a difficult diagnosis. You mentioned the NIH and the clinical trials. Where can someone find, if they say, hey, I want to get involved with those, where can they go to in order to get to those resources?
Yeah, there's one major study. It's the Pancreatic Cancer Early Detection Consortium. It's called proceedstudy.org. The National Medical Association is not directly connected to this organization, but this is a consortium of multiple centers that is dealing with the study that can give a lot more information for those that have family members and those that have individuals themselves that are suffering from pancreatic cancer.
Thank you, Dr. Mitchell. We certainly look forward to having you back, because this is a topic that unfortunately keeps impacting our community. And I'm sure people have a lot of different questions.
Thank you, Dr. Ebony. And you can find out more about the National Medical Association at www.nmanet.org. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And up next, an experimental treatment for ALS is giving some patients hope. Stay with us. We'll explain.
Welcome to The Other Side of Change, only on the Black Star Network and hosted by myself, Bria Baker, and my good sis, Jamira Burley. We are just two millennial women tackling everything at the intersection of politics, gender, and pop culture.
And we don't just settle for commentary. This is about solution-driven dialogue to get us to the world as it could be and not just as it is.
Watch us on the Black Star Network, so tune in to The Other Side of Change.
An estimated 35,000 people in the United States are living with ALS, also known as the Lou Gehrig's disease. While there is no cure for the disease, recent medical reports reveal there is some progress in preventing it. Dr. Richard Benson, director of the National Institute of Neurological Disorders and Stroke, joins us now to talk about it. Welcome, Dr. Benson.
Thank you for having me, Dr. Hilton.
Yeah. Now, for our viewers who may have never heard of ALS, can you explain exactly what is it?
Sure. So ALS, or amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, it's a rare progressive neurological disease where individuals who are impacted by this disease get loss of the motor neurons. Let me take a step back and explain, give a little neuroanatomy lesson. Your nervous system or your brain communicates with the environment through either sensing information in the environment. And so we have sensory nerves that are responsible for sensing things in the environment. And then there are motor neurons that are responsible for making movements, or our body initiating certain movements. And so ALS, or amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, is a disease where you lose those neurons that start from the cortex or higher up in the brain. They go down to the spinal cord. Those are called the upper motor neurons. And also you lose those neurons that go from the spinal cord to your hands or your legs, or moving different parts of your body. So with ALS, you lose both of those neurons, the upper and the motor neurons. Just a little bit about the epidemiology of ALS, which I think is important. As I mentioned, it's a rare neurological disease, and there are about 2 people that have ALS per 100,000 people in the United States. And so that means about 30 to 35,000 people in the United States are living with ALS, according to data from the ALS Foundation.
And of those 35,000 people, are they a certain age group, any occupation or environmental exposures? Like, you know, I've heard that military population is particular interest. Why is that? And why do they have a higher risk of developing ALS?
It's a really great question, Dr. Hilton. We find that ALS usually starts between the ages of 50 to 65 years old. And when you go from 60 to 80 years old, there's an increased prevalence of ALS in those populations. It stops about 80 because above 80 people that have lived that long usually don't go on to develop ALS. And those are just ranges, because there are younger people that develop it, and there are also older people that develop it as well. Most cases, about 90% of cases of ALS are sporadic. That means they occur and we don't know why they occur. So that means about 10% that occur, there's a reason that it occurs. The connection with military service, I think that may be related to environmental exposures. There could be certain things in the environment that people are exposed to. That's a big area of research that's been studied at the NIH. We have something called the neuroexposome, which looks at external exposures that impact neurological diseases. And so by far, most of the cases are sporadic and we don't know why they occur, but it could be environmental in terms of things that are exposed to. Of the 10%, there are some genetic associations with ALS, and one of them is with a particular enzyme called superoxide dismutase. And that's the one enzyme that the new medications that are being developed are looking to attack.
And with ALS, is it similar to other neurological diseases where if you actually start to get on medications earlier on that you fare better? Or is it such a disease process where it's so rapid that it really doesn't make all that difference?
Well, I still want to caution that we don't have good therapies. The medications that are being developed now in the clinical trials that led to the approval of those medications, there was no significant benefit in the placebo group versus the treatment group. What they did find was that there was a decrease in the amount of a particular neurofilament or one of the nerve breakdown products that they find in the cerebrospinal fluid of people who were treated with that particular medication. But in general with ALS, usually from the period of time from diagnosis to mortality or death is about 3 to 5 years. There are some people that live up to 10 years with ALS, so that's sort of the longer period of the time. We do hope that some of the new therapies will come in and sort of allow people more functionality with ALS.
And can you tell us too, we say that ALS oftentimes has small symptoms, right? Muscle twitching, maybe weakness in a limb or some slurred speech that probably gets overlooked. From your experiences, what is the earliest red flag that should prompt someone to say, hey, I need to actually go be seen by my primary care physician or by a neurologist?
In my experience, some of the earliest symptoms include what we call muscle fasciculations or twitches of the muscles. And that's not enough that the limb is actually moving, the arm or the leg is moving. You just feel like your muscles are sort of moving. We can actually look at the muscles with the light and we can see just movement under the skin of the muscle. And so that's what a fasciculation is. Again, it's not enough that you're seeing, it's not like Parkinson's where you get a tremor. It's just the muscles moving. So that's the first thing. People can also get fasciculations of the tongue. And so I often ask patients to open their mouths and I can look at the tongue and see if there are fasciculations of the tongue. Also, some people that they complain of tripping a lot. They're just sort of walking and they will trip, not over anything. It could be the carpet or just the floor and they'll trip. It may have falls as well. And then also weakness can occur. People start to develop weakness in their arms or their legs as well. In addition to difficulty swallowing, usually the symptoms that bring people in to see a neurologist or a medical professional is a complaint of weakness and falling or difficulty swallowing. One of the patients that I remember, a really nice elderly African-American woman who came in and she was at that later age in her 90s and was just having difficulty swallowing. And I looked and examined her, noticed the fasciculations of her tongue and her muscles and the weakness, but because she was older, some of those other symptoms were missed. The swallowing can get to the point where that person can have difficulty swallowing his or her own saliva. And obviously that's difficult. And if you can't do that, then obviously it's going to be difficult to swallow food and get enough nutrition into your body to sustain yourself.
And can you explain to our viewers, what is the fasciculation of the tongue? What does it look like?
What that is if you look at the tongue, you just see sort of small motor movements or small movements of the tongue. It looks like rolling of the tongue, like there's something under the tongue that's causing it to roll or to move. And so that's what it is. It's something striking when you actually see it. It's not pathognomonic necessarily of ALS, but it's a major finding that if we see fasciculations of the tongue in individuals, then there's a high likelihood that that person has ALS.
And with these symptoms, do they tend to come and go? Or once the symptom presents itself, as far as the tripping, as far as the weakness, as far as the difficulty swallowing, is that a permanent stay, unlike some of the other neurological diseases where we can see the symptom may come, may have a flare, it gets better, and back and forth like that?
That's a really great question. And again, just to go into a little neuroanatomy. So we have the upper and lower motor neurons that go to the muscle cells. And so there some of the muscle nerve endings that go to the muscles, they're divided into motor units. And so when you start to have degeneration or loss of those motor neurons, it may impact a particular motor unit, but not the overall functionality of that particular muscle. So the weakness will come on slowly. It will start with just the twitching of the muscles, and you may see some movement. But when you start to look at like the tongue, you'll see that more, or muscles that control your swallowing. Those muscles are a lot smaller with fewer motor units. So you'll see that type of weakness before you see some of the other weakness. But the weakness in your limbs and to your respiratory muscles, that's usually more insidious. Although when you think of diseases, let me take a step back to make another point. Diseases, in terms of neurological diseases, stroke is the number 4 cause of death in the United States, and is the second most common cause of death worldwide. And that's a neurological condition where you get a sudden onset of a deficit that occurs because of disruption of the blood flow to a part of the brain. So that's a sudden neurological condition. And then you have a disease like Alzheimer's disease or dementia, which occurs usually because of some of the causes we don't know. Some may be due to exposures, but that usually occurs later in life, usually above the age of 60 or 70. We start to see people with that. With ALS, this starts between the 50s and the 60s, and it's not as fast as stroke, but it's not as slow in terms of how it progresses as Alzheimer's disease. But it is sort of progressive pretty quickly when you think in terms of 3 to 5 years, the average period of time that people progress to the point of not being able to breathe or swallow. And then obviously that's incompatible with life. There are some interventions that people can get as well that we can talk about if we have time.
Yeah, and that was actually going to be my final question of what area of ALS research gives you the most hope right now? Is it gene therapy, stem cells, new medication, early detection? Like, what is it that makes you say, okay, we may be able to start making some moves on this disease?
I think prevention, as I say with stroke all the time, the best way to treat a stroke is to prevent it from occurring. Mm-hmm. Although we don't know what causes ALS, we suspect that a lot of it is related to exposures. So I think the best we can do to try to make sure that we improve the environment for all people. We know that there are certain people that live in areas where there's more pollution, more heavy metals and other things that are in the environment that impact them. So making sure that we prevent that as well as healthy diets and exercise. I like thinking in terms of life's essential 8. If you get enough sleep, you control your blood pressure, your blood sugar, your cholesterol, have a good diet, lose weight, good physical activity, do all of those things, and we can improve our brain health overall. So I think prevention is probably the biggest area of research. Until we understand better the mechanisms, I think just looking at I think it's promising that we have this medication now that can decrease this neurofilament in the cerebrospinal fluid. But we just have to understand the mechanism better in terms of how this disease starts and progresses in order to target it better. So I would say overall that prevention is still key.
Yeah. Well, Dr. Benson, thank you for helping us better understand ALS and reminding us that even in the absence of a cure, progress and research still brings hope. So if there's a viewer who says, hey, I'm one of those 35,000 and I'm just getting newly diagnosed, if they want to look to you for some more information, where could they find you?
Well, they can connect me. I'm going to give you my I was no longer with the NIH. I'm at a company, telehealth company called Equium Medical, and it's my first name, Richard Benson, my last name Benson at Equium, EQUUM medical, medical.com.
Well, thank you again, Dr. Benson. We'll have you back shortly.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Hilton.
And still to come, using the phone while you poop may increase your chances of hemorrhoids. A gastroenterologist joins us to explain why. Stay with us.
I'm Brittany Noble, Midwest-born, HBCU educated with experience in newsrooms across the country. Well, I've teamed up with Roland Martin to bring to you The Breakdown. This isn't just news. It's our stories, our voice, our community. Join me for The Breakdown, Monday through Friday at midday, only on the Black Star Network.
Now, research shows that people who use their phones on the toilet have about a 46% higher risk of developing hemorrhoids. From a medical standpoint, is it really the phone or is it the behavior that creates the problem? Joining us now is gastroenterologist Dr. Nadia Sanford. Welcome, Dr. Sanford.
Hi, thanks for having me again.
Yeah, the research says the biggest risk factor isn't straining, but simply spending too long sitting on the toilet. Mm-hmm. Why is that a problem? Like, if I'm just sitting there, isn't it the difference of me sitting there or sitting in a regular seat?
Okay, well, let's talk about hemorrhoids. Hemorrhoids are veins that are normally there and something's causing pressure on them to get big and inflamed. You can see hemorrhoids in pregnant women. That's actually a big one. That's like, I always tease my patients that the kids are the gift that keeps on giving, because they have hemorrhoids way down the line from having kids. Sitting for long periods of time. So if you're driving cross country, truck drivers, because they're sitting for hours and hours, people who do weightlifting or heavy lifting, again, you're putting that Valsalva pressure, that pressure down in that area, then those veins get aggravated and plump up and get swollen. And then you get the symptoms of the itching, the burning, the bleeding that comes from that. Now, the toilet situation is because if you think of a toilet, you're sitting, but there's not support, right? There's that hole in the middle. And so your whole body weight is going where? All that gravity is going down to that area. So that's putting pressure on the area and therefore can aggravate the veins to become hemorrhoids.
See, now you make too much sense. You're making too much sense. So here's the question then. How long is too long to sit on the toilet? Like, what's the ideal amount of time that people should actually be spending in there?
Honestly, you shouldn't be sitting there more than 5-10 minutes most, because, I mean, if you have to go, then you're supposed to go do your business and get off the toilet. The problem is people have done that, but then they're sitting and scrolling on TikTok. They're sitting and scrolling on Instagram. They're sitting and scrolling on Facebook. You go down the rabbit hole, and the next time you look up, it's been 20, 25, 30 minutes.
Right. And what's the big problem? Now, we know hemorrhoids are painful, right? Or some are painful, some are not painful.
Some are, right.
Right. What's the major medical kind of concern that if you develop hemorrhoids, that may end up leading to more complicated issues for you overall?
So they're not dangerous. They're not life-threatening. They're more annoying than anything else. I mean, so internal hemorrhoids are inside the anus, and external hemorrhoids that are outside the anus. The difference with internal hemorrhoids, it's usually those are the ones that bleed. There's no pain there because there's no nerves there that you would feel that. Whereas externally, there are nerves, so you're going to feel that. So the external ones are the more the itching, the burning, the feeling of the protrusion. Now, very rarely you can have people who bleed like stink from the internal hemorrhoids. Those are the older people on blood thinners, people are taking a lot of like anti-inflammatories like Motrin, ibuprofen, goodies. But I've rarely seen anybody get to the point of a life-threatening bleed from hemorrhoids. So it's more of a quality of life issue if it's bleeding a lot or if it's discomfort.
And if a person does get them, like I said, pregnancy is notorious for causing this. So there's many women that say, hey, yes, we have hemorrhoids. How are they actually treated?
Well, a lot of people will run to the store and go get Preparation H. And that's a temporary measure, right? So that's medication that will kind of help with some of the inflammation, but it doesn't kind of remove the hemorrhoids. Sitz baths, so sitting in warm water, again, inflammation, it'll kind of help with that. And then you have suppositories where you put up in the area that more gets to the internal hemorrhoids. And again, they're trying to soothe the inflamed area that is had the pressure on it. Then you get into more permanent treatments. So then the next thing we do is something called hemorrhoid banding, where we're putting rubber bands on the internal hemorrhoids. Remember, I told you internal hemorrhoids, there's no nerve. So it's not a painful procedure. It takes 5 minutes. We do it in the office. You don't have to be put to sleep. You don't have to do any kind of prep. And basically what you're doing, you're putting a rubber band on the internal hemorrhoid, and that's actually cutting the blood supply so that the vein shrinks back down, and then the rubber band falls off in a day or two. And you don't have to do any kind of downtime or anything else like that. And it's about 80 to 90% effective in terms of getting rid of hemorrhoids. Now, there's just people who have really large hemorrhoids where that's not going to work. And at that point, you start talking to a surgeon about what's called a hemorrhoidectomy. That is usually the last resort because it is a painful procedure to recover from, because basically you're stripping the veins out of there and then you still have to poop afterwards in recovery. So that's not fun the first few days afterwards. So that's usually the last resort.
Right. So if you're trying to avoid having that surgery and the banding and all those things, is there anything you can do to kind of help you to not have hemorrhoids and prevent this? Is it beyond the phone habits, right? What about fiber, hydration?
Absolutely. So fiber, drinking at least 6 to 8 glasses of water, exercise, making sure that your stools are soft as possible, that you don't strain, and then you're getting off the toilet as soon as possible. So you go, you have the urge to go, you do it, and then you get off the toilet and go about your business. If you feel like you have the urge to go, but you don't quite go after a few minutes, get up, go do something else, and then come back and do it again. Don't sit there and push and push and push and push and push, because again, that pressure will cause problems.
Now, what about for some of these people who say, hey, I have bad constipation, like I hydrate, I drink the teas, I do all the things, and I am still extremely constipated. What about these squatty potties and other things they see on QVC? Do these types of mechanical devices, do they actually help to alleviate the pressure and make you go easier with your bowel movements, or are they just a gimmick?
Well, I think you have to look at constipation in different reasons why you're constipated. So you have constipation because your stools are not lubricated enough or they're hard. And so that's the reason why you're having problems to get it out. And so that's why we'll tell people to, the water. If that doesn't work, there's Miralax, which actually helps to kind of leave more water in your colon to soften the stool. And that helps a lot of people. And it's very easy to take because it doesn't taste like anything. You just put it in your water or your coffee. Then you have the prescription medications to help. There's irritable bowel syndrome with constipation. So that's a medical condition that causes constipation. The squatty potty is helpful in terms of the mechanism of moving your bowels. So what it's doing is helping when you are sitting on the toilet and your feet are flat. There's an angle that has to happen in terms of the stool to come out smoothly. And sometimes when you're sitting on the toilet with your feet flat, that angle gets kind of cut off. So the squatty potty is kind of like a step stool where you sit and that raises your legs and that helps the angle so that your stool comes out a little better. But again, if your stool is hard from the jump street, it's not going to necessarily help altogether.
Well, thank you, Dr. Sanford, for helping us to understand that scrolling and sitting may be a risky combination, folks. So where can folks
just go sit down somewhere else in the bathroom? Because some people go to the bathroom to escape the kids or escape, and that's like the private place. Just don't sit on the toilet and do it.
Especially, and not at work. That's a whole nother subject. But where can folks find you if they want to scroll social media, but while they're off of the toilet, they just want to find you?
So I work for Atlantic Gastroenterology, which is a part of United Digestive. So we're one of the largest gastroenterology practices in the Southeast, and we have multiple gastroenterologists. We actually have the largest amount of female gastroenterologists in the Southeast as well. But we're online. We're available. Our website is accessible at atlanticgastroenterology.com or uniteddigestive.com.
You heard it there, folks. Well, thank you, Dr. Sanford.
All right. Thanks again for having me again.
Thank you. And still to come, my prescription of the week.
Folks, Black Star Network is here.
Oh, no punches! I'm real revolutionary right now. support this man, Black media. He makes sure that our stories are told.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America, Roland.
Stay black. I love y'all.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, there's a difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
Let's talk about something many people experience in silence: domestic violence. Domestic violence is not only physical abuse, it can also be emotional abuse, threats, intimidation, controlling money, isolating you from loved ones, sexual coercion, stalking, or making you feel afraid in your own home. And one of the most painful parts of abuse is how isolating it can feel. Many survivors believe, well, no one will understand, or maybe it's my fault. Things will get better if I try harder. I have nowhere to go. I'm the only one dealing with this. But hear this clearly. You are not alone. In fact, it is estimated about 20 people per minute are physically abused by an intimate partner in the United States of America. People from every background, every income level, every age group, every profession. Abuse does not mean weakness. It means someone is choosing to harm and control. And often abuse happens gradually. What starts as jealousy becomes control. What starts as criticism becomes humiliation. What starts as anger becomes fear. That's why many strong, intelligent, capable people find themselves in abusive relationships. This is not about intelligence. It's about manipulation. Abuse can affect your body too, from anxiety, trouble sleeping, headaches, high blood pressure, depression, chronic pain, feeling like you're always on edge. Your body may be carrying what your mouth has been too afraid to say. So if this message feels personal to you, you are not crazy. You are not overreacting. You are not the cause of someone else's abuse, and you do not have to figure it all out today. Sometimes healing begins with one small step: telling someone that you trust, or saving important documents, calling a hotline, making a safety plan, speaking to a counselor, or simply admitting to yourself that this is actually abuse. There is help, there is support, there is life after this. And you deserve love that feels safe. You deserve peace that actually lasts. And you deserve to know this truth, that you are not alone. And that, my friends, is my prescription of the week. Thank you all for watching, and we will see you next week on Second Opinion.